Hello, music thinkers around the world. This is Christof Zürn. Welcome to the Power of Music Thinking, where I deconstruct the mental models of exceptional people who perform at the top of their fields and also happen to be musicians. My job is to find the links between their music and their work, the untold stories, the seminal texts and scientific research, and the unique habits they use to succeed, so that you can leverage their experiences as a toolkit for your own path. My guest today is Flynn Taylor. Alex is a research assistant at the Flinders University in South Australia, where he works with the Frontiers of Restoration Ecology team with degrees in biodiversity, conservation, and animal behavior. He is currently pioneering work in the fascinating field of soil ecoacoustics. And outside the lab, he's also the bassist of the indie rock band Stormy-Lou. So, what exactly is soil ecoacoustics? Now, Alex literally sticks aluminum probes and contact microphones into the ground to listen to the hidden vibrations of the earth, capturing the sounds of worms, beetles, and the shifting soil habitat itself. To give you an idea of what that actually sounds like, Alex shared a special recording with me. So during a recent student workshop, he inserted one of his probes into the soil, and a gum snout moth caterpillar got incredibly curious. It started crawling all over the microphone. It is such a fascinating recording because you can literally hear the stickiness of its crawl and the tiny hairs on this pseudo feet. Have a listen. So, in this episode, we discuss how Alex's musical brain transforms his scientific approach. We explore why he views the environment not as isolated data points to be filtered, but as a complete mix where birds, insects, and even loud cargo trains are all part of one grand interconnected soundscape. And we talk about the frequency harmony of nature, the difference between Western scientific and First Nations wisdom, and we actually listen to the fascinating differences between healthy, biodiverse soil and low-life soil right here on the show. So please enjoy this deep dive into the sounds of the underground with Alex Taylor. Welcome to the Power of Music Thinking. This is the podcast for people with a musical heart and a wicked job. We're looking for stories, insights and tools from the big world of music to inspire leaders and followers to listen, tune, play and perform in whatever field you're operating. Welcome, Alex. Welcome to the Power of Music Thinking.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Alex, my first question, ritual question is, what was your first sonic or most memorable sonic experience that had an impact on you?
Oh, wow. What a question. Actually, if I think back to my earliest memory, it's going to be my grandparents who live in Manchester where I grew up, lived right on a train track, but they lived also right next to like some woods that went down to the canals. And I remember always being fascinated by the soundscape in that backyard because you'd have pretty much always the sound of the woods, like the birds chirping and the leaves rustling, but then so periodically you'd get this enormous like cacophony as like a train goes through, and so it was like that juxtaposition of like these like trains, which were usually cargo trains, so very long and loud, with like the sounds of nature. And yeah, that would be my earliest like sonic memory.
The mix of these two, the man-made and the machine, and the nature. Wow, that already reveals a lot of what we're talking about today, actually. Funny
it does.
So, but also any musical influences, because you're also playing in a band.
Yeah. I do play in a band. I think music was not a huge part of my childhood, surprisingly, for how important it is now in my life. I did not grow up. I didn't live in a household where there was music playing at all. So it was quite a quiet house. And, I remember my parents listening to music, but it was very occasionally, and they didn't try, a lot of parents, they show their kids their music that they love, but I don't think I ever remember having much of that experience with my parents other than a handful of bands. So it wasn't until I was coming out of high school that I actually started getting into music, and it was from a lot of like the local stuff. Like when I moved to Adelaide, so as I became like 16 years old and was able to start going to shows, started listening to a lot of the local music. And it's kind of strange that then I was listening to Adelaide bands back then before I was listening to like AC/DC and some of these like rock legends like I hadn't listened to before I even listened to like Adelaide bands. So it was quite a weird experience in that way.
Listening from the local, from what's there. So that links pretty good to what you just mentioned about the train and the birds. And so music is where you are. Nowadays when you're 16, maybe your first music experiences is via a device.
It would have been like mostly live music. So like that's why I love live music, and I do it now. And I think because my first, like, I guess when I think about my most pivotal start to loving music was in a live sense at like the age of 16. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And like coming so late into it is quite strange. But I think also starting at that local level and then working up to finding the bigger bands, the international bands, you kind of get an appreciation. I got appreciation for music production because I was going from listening to almost DIY stuff to then let studio produce music. And it was like, oh, whoa, like this really opens up, like when you see how it's professionally done, it really opens up like how incredible music can be.
And that's also nice music education in that sense. So you hear directly, and you first make up your mind what it is and what you feel about it, and later in every stage you feel more quality. If it would be the other way around, all your life would be disappointing because you might have heard all the best stuff in the beginning, and maybe everything compared to it would be less. So that's sounds very nice. Alex, can you tell us a little bit about yourself so that the listener has an idea who you are, and then we dive into something that's very special, soil ecoacoustics, and we want to know everything about it and what we can do with it.
So I, as well as being a musician, I guess a scientific researcher, so a lot of it is in the space of ecology and environmental science. I studied biodiversity and conservation at Flinders University in Adelaide, and also animal behaviour. So I did those 2 degrees. And towards the back end of my bachelor degrees, I got the opportunity to do a research project. And I'd already been volunteering a lot of time in a lab with my now supervisor, Martin Breed, who runs a restoration ecology lab. And it's a lot surrounding how we can use soil biodiversity and soil research to improve restoration of terrestrial ecosystems. And so I was doing a lot of veg surveys and soil surveys. And then I got this opportunity to come along a research project, and Martin sat me down and he actually said, like, Alex, I know you're interested in veg and I know you're interested in soil, but what about outside of your university science understanding, what are you interested in? And that's when I told him about how I was a musician and like love music and sound. And he'd just published this paper with my other supervisor, Jake Robinson.
And what paper was it?
This was called, the name escapes me. But it's along the lines of soil ecoacoustics in UK forests. So they did this, Jake did this in the UK before he moved to Adelaide. And it was a field study. And it was he's an ecoacoustician by trade, and then decided to do it in soil.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so they just published this paper like a month before this meeting. And because Jake had just moved over, they were really interested in seeing if it was potentially could be moved in Australia with this research group. And yeah, I read the paper back to front and was just like in awe, because it was like my two great passions come together, music and ecology. And so it was like, oh, this is amazing. And then I did that for 6 months, and that was a paper we put out called Sounds of the Underground. And that was a fantastic experience. And then I did my honours then in animal behaviour, keeping on going with this research, and I listened to worms in buckets and played with how many worms were in each bucket. So they changed the abundance level. So I would have 3 worms in one bucket and then 30 worms in the other bucket, and see if they sounded different.
Oh.
I'm yet to publish that. I kind of got to a point where I realized with that research that my analysis, I need to refine the analysis stage of what I'm doing. So I'm working on a few other projects and fine-tuning the analysis. And then I'll probably, once I've got that sorted, take it back to my honours results and play with it a bit more. And then now I'm a research assistant and about to start my PhD. So I'm just in a very early stage of a research career, which is really exciting.
Sounds a bit like music when you just mentioned listening to the worms and finding patterns from one worm, and then see how these patterns go together and make a bigger unit. So that's
exactly
in that sense a very musical thing. And first trying to understand what it is and what a pattern is, because a pattern should always recur or repeat or I saw your paper, what's it called, hums in the hummus. Let's say find out a bit more about soil ecoacoustics, and what struck me also as a researcher was there are 17 people writing or are on the paper, and that's quite interesting. So I would like to hear more. And also in the appendix, you see that there are 60 sources. So this must be something where a lot of different researchers at least agree to do something together. And I think, that's maybe worth hearing more about.
Yeah, totally. A lot of this came out of my honours year, where I had to do a big literature review. So I wanted to, because there isn't many people who've collated all of the soil ecoacoustics work from its very early origins in the late 90s to now. And I chose to do that for my literature review, and what came from that was a review we put out in Proceedings B, and that was a great experience to look at, how many papers already talked about how we can use sound to monitor soil biodiversity. And then from there we were like, well, there's all these groups working on the same thing but in different areas all over the world, some in the UK, some in Europe, some here in Australia. And it was like, I don't know, I think both of my supervisors, Martin and Jake, have a very well-developed idea that as scientists we should be working together instead of having camps and territories. Like, we should be doing open science. And I'm a like do a lot of community work, and that just struck a chord with me. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like we really wanted to reach out to people and all come together and form this sort of network of people working in the space, interested in working in the space. And so we did that. We reached out to a bunch of these authors that I had cited in my honours assessment, like people who've been leading this research for a few years now, in various different places in the world. And we had a big 2-hour workshop where we sort of all came together and chatted through a few topics. And where do you see this field going? Because it's been recorded that there's a lot of interest in new ways of monitoring soil biodiversity, because it's so important to our world's agriculture and food sources, and also terrestrial biodiversity as well. And so, yeah, we had this great workshop and it went really well. And from that, we decided to write this paper, which is, I guess, a culmination of lots of different perspectives of where the field is currently at, what are the opportunities and challenges, and how do we move forwards as a field, I guess. And it was a really positive experience. And for myself to sort of see how big collaborative science was done, that was sort of my first experience of that. So it was really, really interesting.
Yeah, and also worldwide.
So yeah.
Really bringing everyone together. Maybe it's good to explain to people that have never heard soil ecoacoustics what it is, and in one sense, it's like we in the podcast we also had episodes about listening or deep listening, and that's more listening to your environment, having more attention to something, and what you are doing is underground. And it's like sticking microphones in the earth and listen and making sense out of it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it stemmed from ecoacoustics. It as a whole was this idea that, it's similar to deep listening, where it's like we can really get a lot of information out of the soundscape in the environment, and the data we collect with microphones can almost like be a representative of community structure or biodiversity and these things. And it started with birds, bats and cetaceans, like these very vocal species. And with soil ecoacoustics, it's taking that approach and those techniques and using them below ground. So getting a aluminium probe that's inserted about 15 centimeters into the soil, and then attaching a contact microphone onto this probe, which I think those microphones are designed for, I guess, like brass instruments, like your trumpets and your saxophones. So very sensitive to that surface vibration, which is what we're trying to pick up in the soil. So because a lot of the sound, or we'd say vibrations, are substrate-borne vibrations. So they occur when worms sort of move through the soil, or beetles or spiders, these invertebrates, they move through the soil column, and this shifts all the soil particles, which creates like these vibrations, like low-level vibrations. And so if we have a super sensitive microphone, we can sort of pick it up, and
it's a contact microphone, right? So it's not the normal microphone that we use. So it's really a contact microphone, and I find it very interesting that you put in a probe. What you just said, aluminum probe. So that actually transports, because maybe also good to mention that sound travels in different speeds in different material. And I learned somewhere that in air, I don't know how quick it is, you might know better, but that the quickest travel is in metal. So that's why there's an aluminum, and then a contact microphone just to make it more sensitive or more clear. Nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think aluminium might be the second or third fastest metal that's been tested that sound passes through. I think the other two options were just like really expensive metals. So it was like, you can get aluminium probes anywhere. And it's you don't have to use the probe. Like I know people who just bury the actual microphone itself, or might bury like a hydrophone, which is a little bit different. But with us, we thought we'd create this sort of, like I guess like a lightning rod for sound that goes a bit deeper than you might be able to get with the actual microphone itself. And then you clip it on and the sound travels through the probe straight into the microphone. Yeah. And it works different to like the microphones we use to record our voice, because that's like air pressure waves rather than those substrate-borne vibrations.
Yeah, and because because of the material in the air, it's, I don't know, I'm not an expert on it, but it feels like if you use a normal microphone outside, it's always more or less the same kind of air and the same kind of speed what you hear. But if you put it into a soil, you don't exactly know the material in the soil. So are there more stones? Is it more dense? Is it maybe more the moisture, or is it very dry? So are these is this something that you explore beforehand, or is this something that you just do a test? And maybe how many microphones do you need? Because if I want to record birds, I think one or two might be perfect. So one very close, and maybe one further away. But if you want to measure, is measure the right word? To measure the sound? How many microphones? How would this look like?
It's I guess when I've done field work, I've used 8 microphones at each site, so sort of spreading them with random geometric points across the site, so that you get a sample of like the spread in the sounds. Because like birds, that sound travels so far, because it's quite high level, like super powerful sound. But with the sound that we're expecting in soil, it's very low decibel levels. So if we only record in one spot, you've only got a small snapshot of the site itself, and the actual diversity of the sound at this site isn't represented by one very small spot. So we recorded 8 microphones simultaneously, and then sort of culminated them all into the site sound. And I think with that sort of approach, that design, the more microphones, the better, because you get a better representation. But that also just comes down to budget, because the microphones are expensive. So
absolutely. And you have to do a remix of the whole thing. It's like spatial recording in a room or in a venue. And I can imagine that maybe how big is the field?
Each site sort of differed a little bit. What we tend to do is have a randomized center point, and then we actually didn't create a massive. I can't remember the actual buffer of the size of the field itself, but it's within you'd be able to see each microphone from the central point. So it's all reasonably close together. So you are getting this understanding of a certain patch of land. Maybe we start with the low life and the healthy soil. So these are 2 recordings that Jake Robinson did. And so the low life soil is literally like low biodiversity measures, and then the healthy soil is high biodiversity measures. And I think it's really interesting how much of a difference you can hear. Yeah, this is the low-life soil, so not much complexity, not much diversity in the noises that you're hearing. Yeah. So right now, I think largely what you're hearing is that just static air, or what's it called, the ambience in the soundscape. Whereas if you've got more species, you're going to hear the sounds of them moving. So you'll hear in the healthy soil recording what that sounds like, but you literally will hear activity, and that will sound not like one monotone ambient sound. Mm. Yeah, so that popping and crackling is the sounds of things moving through the soil column and displacing particles. I think that's worms that you're hearing. A lot of what they found in the UK were worms. They were looking at the abundance level of worms, so it sounds like a wriggling worm to me. I think it has been pitch shifted, but it actually doesn't sound too dissimilar to this, like when you've got it on in your ears. I actually did a recording of a caterpillar yesterday. I'll send it through, and you can maybe play that at some point. So you're hearing a change in complexity, so how the patterns shift so much throughout the time of the recording. And likewise, the diversity of sounds, so how different all the different frequencies and intervals are between the noises.
Yeah, but it's not like, oh, I hear 3 worm, 2...
Not yet.
It's not like this.
Hopefully at some point we can get to that is the end goal, is to be able to get to a point where we can pick out like what is what. But it sort of requires a lot of, to get sciencey, a lot of data and a lot of recordings, and also a lot of knowledge about what those sounds are. So you have to know, it has to be in a laboratory where you've put 3 worms in. You can say, this is what 3 worms sound like. This is what a beetle sounds like. This is what a millipede sounds like. And then actually they use a lot of computer models. Like they train computer models to label and pick out sounds. So once we've got that bank of data and that knowledge, hopefully we can get to a point where we can isolate certain species.
We have another one.
Yeah, so I put a hydrophone on an ant's nest. That's what you're hearing right now. And it was on the surface level, so it wasn't below ground, but it was on top of an ant's nest. So you probably are hearing a mixture of the ants crawling all over the hydrophone, but also throughout the upper chambers of the ant's nest. You can also hear a bit of bird song.
How do you do the remix? Is this automatically, because then you have eight tracks?
We put each recording through the analysis process separately and then average the actual results. So it wasn't necessarily a mix of all 8 tracks together. Yeah. It was analyzed all individually, and then you get numerical outputs of like these indices, which are like measures of, say, acoustic complexity or acoustic diversity, and we average those numerical values together to get the representation of the site.
Right. So it was more like data crunching afterwards instead of making a sonic remix of the soundscape.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'd love to explore some more artistic sort of process there and actually do some remixing and seeing if that. But on a science level, it's very data crunchy analysis, sort of a lot of time spent in RStudio, which is like a coding software that we use to analyze data. And it actually ends up being quite a lot of time at the computer.
Right. Because my question is a bit more in music thinking. What we're doing is actually finding something in music and making analogies to the real world. And my hypothesis is always that a musician might do it different than a non-musician. So this would be like thinking more in the sense of a remix instead of mixing data, for example. But that's my
I like that thought. Yeah.
And to bring this a bit further, because you're in Australia, in Adelaide, and is this also where you do the recordings? Let's say near Adelaide, or are these certain places?
Yeah, I mean, my fieldwork so far has been all in South Australia. So you have Adelaide, which is on the Adelaide Plains, which the traditional custodians of this area is the Kaurna people. And then you have the Adelaide Hills that hugs the eastern, sort of northeastern wall of the Adelaide Plains. And then as you go over the Adelaide Hills, you get into what's Paramount country. So it's a different group of First Nations people. And there's this beautiful reserve there and like floating, rolling sort of vale. And there's a reservoir. It's called Mount Bold Reservoir. And the site is run by SA Water, which is like our water, government water body. And they sort of gave me approval to go onto that land. And they had a whole range of sort of revegetated forest and then old forest or woodlands, actually. And then they had a bunch of cleared grass sites, and that's where I did my research 2 or 3 years ago now. And then recently I've been doing some more stuff, but on the actual university campus, which is in the Adelaide Plains. Yeah.
I'm asking a bit, and you just mentioned it, the First Nation people, the Kaurna people, as you just said. I'm very interested in that part, because one part to understand the soil is now from a scientific point of view, like soil ecoacoustics. But I imagine that in former times, and especially Aborigines or First Nation people, especially when you think about things like the song lines, there's a famous book about it, and there's a lot of singing and like the didgeridoo, for example, where I can imagine that it has some kind of connection with the soil, with the earth. Is there any wisdom or anything that could help you? And I understand that asking this as a scientist is maybe a stupid question, because you have to measure everything. But is there something that you could sense, maybe more as a musician there? You think, hey, wow, these people already know before we do the measurement how the soil works, but that's highly hypothetical. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess for me, I'm a white person on First Nations land, and so I'm a scientist as well. And there's a lot of interesting conversations about Western science versus First Nations science here in Australia, where I would consider First Nations science to be as informative, if not more, than Western science in some cases. Like their culture, they were so in touch with nature that, in fact, they were part of nature, and that's something that I think is lost in the Western world, where the Kaurna people, they were part of the ecosystem, and they still are part of the ecosystem, and they had such a thorough knowledge of all aspects of the ecosystem. So that would be the soil, the forest, the oceans. And I think they don't just experience it through sight like Western science does. They definitely listen to the environment, and they used all of their senses to feel and experience ecosystems. And so there's a whole wealth of knowledge that these people have. And I would love to, as a Western scientist, be able to comprehend even half of that. But I think it's understanding how to approach that in a respectful way, where I think a lot of Western scientists will approach it wanting to give and take, which is not how First Nations culture works. They have their knowledge, and so they must lead in that knowledge. And so I can't give and take from that system because it's not me, like I'm a white person. So I guess it would look like working in partnership, so that it would be co-led. I would love to do a co-led project that where, I have my perspective as a musician and as a Western scientist, and to see how that might work with First Nations people. But there's a fantastic group here in Adelaide called the Ghana Fire Crew, and they've brought back a lot of reinstilled a lot of their cultural burning practices, and I think that's something that's super important for soil, because here in Australia, a lot of in South Australia, a lot of our ecosystem relies on small fires, like low heat fires, and that goes for the soil and our seed bank as well. So I'd be really fascinated to see what the difference in sound is through cultural burns in burnt and unburnt soils. So yeah, but I want to make sure that that's done in a respectful manner, of course.
I never thought about that part, that give and take, because normally I'm also a white Western. Think, okay, I have an idea, you have an idea, let's bring it together, remix it, and then we both get better. But that's I learn a very Western way to look at it.
Yeah. I think a lot of it just comes with acknowledging that there's a difference. Like, it's not that you need to change how you think. It's just acknowledging that there is a difference in the ways of thinking, and both are appropriate. And, there's a few people that would disregard the amount of knowledge and science that was conducted on these lands before it was colonized. And, I think it's dreadful because there was immense levels of science and understanding and agriculture here on Australian soil before colonizers were here. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Do you think this is the same all over Australia?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's over 250 different nations here in Australia. If this place wasn't colonized, we wouldn't be one country. We would be over 250. We were over 250 nations. And I reflect on that a lot when I think about, other continents. Like, we are essentially a continent made up of over 250 nations, and colonizers made that all one country. And it's incredibly, bizarre thinking that we would fit all these nations under one flag. And that's the thing. It's with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here in Australia. It differs group to group. These are all different nations, and so their traditions and their culture are slightly different, although there is shared experiences. But yeah, I'm that holistic whole approach to looking at ecosystem and what they call caring as country. So caring as part of the country itself, is pretty nationwide as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, so they operate from the center of their knowledge and the center of their being, where they are. I also thought if you bring together 17 authors from all over the world for one theme, I'm just imagine how it would be to bring 17 nation people together with that theme. What would come out of it, or what could you learn from it? And I'm hesitant to also say learn, because the question is what's the learning. So is it always to learn, or is it more to recognize, or more to understand?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just to experience. I think sometimes it's just to experience and not to take anything from it. Like, I think there's a lot of beauty in that. I've been to a lot of performances, like musical performances of First Nations people, that as an audience member, you're used to coming in, experiencing something and learning away from it, or wanting to then apply it to your musical project or what. Like, you take that inspiration and influence. Whereas I think when I've watched First Nations performances and, like, you know, say they play the didgeridoo or the yidaki, you know, for me, it's just an experience. I wouldn't, like, in my opinion, I wouldn't then want to go and take that and apply it to thing. I want to just experience their culture and appreciate just that itself. Yeah.
So there's a lot of respect for this. I'm also thinking about, we just talked about what can we hear from underground. But we hear a lot more from what we want to hear in the underground. So all the other noises. So how do you do this?
Yeah, this is a tricky sort of thing I've been working on. So yeah, when you have these sensitive microphones in soil, it's like you're collecting the vibrations from the animals, from the invertebrates, and, you know, this is what we call biophony. But then you also are collecting the sounds of wind and rain or what is called geophony, those like environmental sounds. And then you also get, you know, if you're close enough to a road, you'll hear a car go past. And I used to have this idea that those are unwanted sounds because you're trying to focus on the invertebrates themselves. But I had a fantastic conversation recently I think it was a comment on the review for the Hums and the Hummus paper from one of the reviewers that said, a soundscape is a soundscape, and if you take things out of it, then you're not representing the soundscape itself. And so in an ecological sense, if you're only listening to the biophony, are you getting the whole picture of that ecosystem? Because the traffic going past is going to influence the bird's behavior, which is then going to influence what happens in the soil. And so, you know, when you listen to a song, you wouldn't, I mean, some people might, but you wouldn't isolate just the trumpet and consider it the whole song. You know, it's all the different parts of the production that make it what it is. And so that's made me rethink how I look at soil ecoacoustics, and maybe there isn't a need to remove the traffic noise or the wind noise. I think where I need to move from here is, how do I refine the techniques so that the biological sounds are more present in the actual, like, I guess, mix itself. Yeah.
It links also with your sonic experience at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
it's literally, you couldn't separate the trains from the birds.
No,
it's the trains and the birds. Yeah.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be my grandparents' backyard if it didn't have the train coming through it. It would just be the woods. So, yeah, it's definitely, I guess this is where my music brain has definitely taken over in that sense, because the science brain wants to focus on the biological sounds. But yeah, my music brain is like, well, actually, all of the sound is relevant and important to that ecosystem.
Yeah.
And that soundscape. Yeah.
Because this could be, and I'm just making this up on the spot. So, like, going back to the train and the birds, it could be if let's say the way how the train passes the country is maybe not good for the birds, whatever this might mean. If you could find out if maybe the train could ride quicker or slower, what would this be? And this is interesting. So that's also a bit maybe remixing, trying to change. It's very, very modern composing when we're at our DAWs, our digital workstations, and when we try to make the music and try to make sense out of it. If this could be something that we could learn from the land, and we say, okay, because to be clear, you're not doing soil ecoacoustics for the fun of the sound. You do it to understand so that when you hear something that you can act or react, or at least inform people to do something different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, totally. It's actually interesting because you talk about the train and its influence on the birds. Well, there is a lot of research in acoustics that literally is all about how do we make things quieter so it doesn't have as much effect, usually on human civilization. So it's like, how do we quieten urban spaces so that we all feel more at peace? But I think a lot of it can be applied to the environment as well. And, you know, birds have evolved especially to sing within their frequency bands, because there would be other birds that sing in higher frequency bands or lower frequency bands. And so over time, the birds in an area have all worked out where they want to sit, whether they want to compete with others or whether they just want to sit in their own frequency range. And this is how they communicate with each other. It's how they talk to each other. It's how they reproduce. It's how they defend their habitat, by singing together. And they've worked out a beautiful harmony there where the kookaburra will sing in a different register to the lorikeet. And so it's like they work in harmony, but then you bring a giant train through it and it fills every single frequency in the room. Like, you know, I guess if you mix drums and you just blew the cymbals out of, you know, so all you can hear is cymbal noise and the wash of cymbals. It's very similar to that. So it's like, yeah, if we can quieten the trains and have them sit in, you know, a small frequency range, we are going to like have a lot less impact on that bird song. And also for insects as well, like cicadas are very similar in the way that they vocalize, crickets as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a lot of to explore. So how far are you at the moment? Is this just the beginning, or is this already, or where is this field at the moment?
Yeah, well and truly at the beginning. I frequently joke about how I have a lifetime of research ahead of me, which is a very fortunate position to be in, especially because it complements my other passions so well with music. And yeah, it's all applicable to each other. The music is applicable to the science and the science is applicable to the music. And yeah, because I'm really looking at the fundamentals now of soil ecoacoustics. So what you were saying before about how the soil medium itself affects the sound. So there's been a bit of research done in that, but not in a biological sense. So I'm now looking, like my current project is looking at how biological sounds transform through the soil column, and then that changing depending on the moisture or the makeup of the particles. Because what people often don't understand is that soil itself is a habitat. It's not the particles of dirt. It's the makeup of particles, and then water and the air pockets and the invertebrates and the microbial species. You know, this big collective habitat. And so understanding how those changes to the habitat alter the biological sounds is, I guess, that really important. Because if I want to compare my data here in South Australia, where we have very arid soils, how can that be compared with the damp soils in the Northern Territory's rainforests? Like, because if the soil medium is different, like it will affect the sound. And so if we understand how it's done that, we can then compare the data in a better way. Yeah.
That's very interesting. And also you compare the south and the north of Australia, but I can imagine people, the listeners are worldwide. Everybody is now in a different place in Europe or in the Americas. And I read in the Hums and the Hummus paper, there's one part at the end where I thought, oh, that's interesting. So it was like engaging citizens through participatory research. So I thought, hey, that's cool. Can I help, or how can we help as citizens? Shall we all buy microphones, create data? And in the Netherlands, where I live, there's one day in the year where you count birds, and you just put it into a database so that people know the population. So is there anything that we and the listeners can help to make this better?
I hope so one day. At the moment, I'm not aware of any projects that are doing it, but it is definitely something that we really, really want to do. Like, we are very passionate about citizen science as a group, and it's just, if we can, once we have the understanding of the microphones and the soil mediums, we want to make sure that there is some way for people out there who are interested in soil research or acoustic research to also take part in what we're doing. So, hopefully it will look like something that you can plug into your phone that you can stick in the soil and you can record. You can do this with birds at the moment already.
Yeah.
There are apps on your phone that use your phone microphone, but I would imagine with soil we'll need something a little bit more sensitive. So yeah, that would be a huge project I'd love to work on, but I think for now we really need to understand the fundamentals so that we can, I guess, create something that is affordable and usable by citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. I also can imagine we talk about underground, but when we normally talk about soundscape, it's above ground. And I can imagine that this might be also very interesting. So if you know the soil, how does it connect with what's above? Because a certain sound from above has an effect on underground and also vice versa. So that could also be interesting.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, above ground sounds can penetrate the soil, like the pressure waves will go through some of the soil column, but also the things that create the sound above ground, so the birds, are eating things below ground. So in that sense, we know that worms rise to the surface when they hear a certain sound, and that's often to do with rainfall and the water in the soil, although that's not confirmed. That's the leading hypothesis. And so we know that above ground sound influences the below ground activity and vice versa. Exactly. There's birds that sit up in the trees and they listen for vibrations of beetles rising to the surface, and they have such sensitive organs that they can hear it, and then they'll shoot down and grab themselves a little snack. So it's completely like every ecosystem is so interactive. I think it's really special. And it would be fantastic to be at a point where citizen sciences can, hear it all, and it tells you what's in your local area and what you can do to help them out. Like, that's the dream.
Yeah, wow. That sounds like the future, and also bring everything together. The sounds of the birds, the wisdom of First Nation people, and science in any way. All right, Alex, thank you very much. Thanks for all your insights. It was really new world that's coming up from deep listening above ground and going underground. So thank you.
Oh, thanks so much. Like, it's when you messaged me, I was like, oh, this is such a great time to talk about, I don't know, like you said, the whole idea of the podcast is how do musicians think differently, and I think I'm in such a awesome position as a musician scientist to be able to combine two worlds, and I love to talk about it.
Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate this, because listening is one of the top leadership skills, and I feel honored about this. It is my mission to find, create, and share inspirations for meaningful collaboration based on music analogies. If you want to support this, please subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, or write a review on iTunes or Spotify. And more inspirations can be found on musicthinking.com. We have a blog, and you can download the Music Thinking Framework. And finally, I would love to hear your feedback. And if you need help with a business challenge, please reach out to me via email, podcast@musicthinking.com.